Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesdays with Wendy, where we make small business ownership less stressful one step at a time. Today, we're going to wrap up our series this month on which expenses are tax deductible in your business. We're going to find out the one thing you really need to do to ensure that these expenses are going to be deductible if you're ever audited. First, if you're watching the replay, thank you so much. I hope that these videos bring you lots of good information, and I would love to know. Comment below if you're watching on replay. Um, if you've never met me before, my name is Wendy Kane. I'm the owner of Kane Accounting and Financial Coaching. I do bookkeeping and payroll for independent contractors and small businesses so that you can have peace at tax time and throughout the rest of the year. Okay, so our series this month was on how to know which expenses are tax deductible. We have talked about meals and entertainment. Remember, meals are 50% deductible if they're with a client. Entertainment is no longer deductible. We talked about mileage. You need to be keeping a log. Nowadays, just use an app. That's the easiest thing to do. And we also talked about larger expenses and how you may be able to deduct the whole expense this year. You may not. It just depends. Um, you can go back and watch last week's episode if you want to know more about that. To tie all this together, though, if you're ever audited, because if you're not audited, I guess they're deductible. If they never say anything, then fine. You were able to deduct it. You got away with it if it was an iffy one. But we don't want to go iffy, though. We want to be sure. So what you're going to do to make sure you have the best chance of an auditor agreeing that they are tax deductible is this: document, document, document. You need to have written down somewhere who you were meeting with, what the business purpose was, what you talked about, some sort of documentation like that. You need to have, like on a meal receipt, just jot down real quick who the client was, or if it's maybe not a client, but like a networking event, just jot down so and so networking event. One other way is to have these receipts sent to your email if at all possible. That's the easiest way. I've got a folder, I have a label in my Gmail that says receipts, and every receipt that is emailed to me goes in there. Then in QuickBooks, you can also, when you enter the transaction in QuickBooks, there's a memo line, and you can just quickly type in what that was for, who you met with, why, briefly what you talked about. And it doesn't, I mean, you don't need an outline. You can be like, you know, talked about upcoming networking event, or talked about, I don't know, whatever it is your business does, talked about the project in 2 months that we might work on together. That is the best way to hopefully ensure that the expenses in your business will be tax deductible. Ultimately, remember, it doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what you think. If you're audited, it matters what the auditor thinks. So you've got to have enough of an documentation to prove to an auditor that this is what the business expense was, this is why I did it, and have them agree with you. I'll mention one story. I heard this on a podcast a few weeks ago. This is a tax preparer for some celebrities out in California. He was able to convince an auditor to let this celebrity deduct her yacht expenses. Now, I don't think the purchase of the yacht didn't count, but she would regularly host clients, host events, and do whatever she did on the yacht. She kept meticulous records of what day everything happened, who the people were that were there, what they talked about. She had a whole log of every time she used the yacht. Here's what she did for business purposes. And the auditor allowed it. So that's pretty cool. If you have good documentation, you stand a greater chance of having the auditor allow something. Now, what should you go buy a yacht and just try that? No, I wouldn't go buy a yacht just to buy a yacht. And also remember, okay, so he deducted some yacht expenses and the auditor liked it, but do you hear that? the auditor. They got audited. So if you if you're one of these people who's going to freak out if you get the letter in the mail saying, hey, we want to look at your tax return a little closer, you might not want to be so aggressive. You can dial it back a bit. You know, there's varying degrees. There's certain things that are safe, there's certain things that are kind of pushing the envelope, and you can find a tax preparer anywhere along the spectrum. Some are very conservative and they don't want to try anything. Some are pushing the envelope and deducting crazy stuff that I may not think is deductible, but if you want to go that route, you can. I don't personally. I would rather be able to sleep at night. That's always my gauge, is that I tell my clients, I'm like, look, I have to be able to, one, sleep at night, and two, if we're ever sitting across the table from an auditor, we've got to be able to look that auditor in the eye and say, very honestly and very truthful, here's what this expense was, and here's why we had it. And that's my personal gauge as to how as to whether or not an expense is deductible in your business. All right, that is it for this week and this month. Remember, no one is born knowing how to do this, and it is not taught in school. If you are feeling lost and overwhelmed, especially with the deductibility of certain things in your business, you're not alone. That's why I'm here to help you. Go to my website. You can sign up for my newsletter. I've got great tips like this throughout the month. See y'all later.